All right, tonight. Next week is your final exam. Tonight, we'll go specific questions. We'll take exam 5. We'll have a brief break in lab after exam 5. The break is, we have to get a break. The lab is for anyone who has any questions. It'll be brief, 10-minute lab. Then we will review exam 5. We will go over all the questions on exam 5. While you're taking exam 5, I'll be writing one of the questions on the board to facilitate have a review of exam 5. And then we will review for the final. Side row, questions. Specific questions. Specific questions. Yes, sir.
How did you change the value of STDN again?
Change the value of?
Where STDN is pointing to?
How do you change where where STDN is pointing to?
Yeah.
So, for instance, the simplest way is to say STDN, right, is already declared by virtue of. Okay, so by virtue of that inclusion, STDN is already declared. So the simplest way to point STDN to something else is to say STDN F open with whatever. So that replaces whatever STDN is pointing to, which is your keyboard essentially, to whatever parameters you give to F open.
Yeah, so why would we use put S instead of F print F?
Why would you use put S?
F put S.
So your question is this. This one does formatting, based upon this first parameter, right? That first parameter, you put format specifiers in and it does whatever formatting it does. This does no formatting. It just takes whatever you give it, puts it there. Fourth row questions. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was absent for the review date of exam 4 a couple weeks ago. I never received it. I forgot to ask last week. Do you still have our exam 4s?
Yep.
Could I get it from you later?
Yeah, after we take exam 5, you can come get it.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody, any questions? Okay, put everything up.
I'll show you what a conceptual one is. This is a conceptual diagram. These things.
Which header file is required to open a file? No, forget the answers on here. What's the name of the file? That's the thing about taking tests. Even with multiple choice, you read the question, you know the answer without looking down the list. After you know the answer, you look down the list to identify the answer in the list. It's not multiple guess, that's why we jokingly call it multiple guess, but multiple choice means you read the question and you know the answer without looking at the list. What's the header file needed to open a file? Where do you think it might be? There you go. The answer happens to be E. But it really is standard value.h. Next. Which function is used to open a file? Nope. Which function is used to open a file? F open. And it returns a file, all caps pointed, yes. That happened to be answer C. Number 3. Which function tests to see if we have read all of the contents of the file?
Oh, FEOF.
FEOF. Who
I
answered?
have a question though.
Yes, sir.
Did you write it like that for the test, or for the syntax of when you write a method somewhere else, do you have to put the parentheses at the end?
You don't have to.
Oh, okay.
I mean, in terms of what function do you use, you would tell somebody, look up FEOF. You wouldn't say, look up FEOF paren.
Okay.
Which function is used to write text data to a file? fprintf. Which happens to be answer D. Number 5. Which function is used to write binary to a file? Write. You see how it works now? You guys know the answer, then you find the answer you know in the list. Or none of the above if it's not in the list. See, that's what some of you did. Number 6. True or false? 50-50 chance. You can use scan F to read from the console instead of a file. True. Number 7. There is only one mode that a file can be opened with. True or false?
False.
False. Lots of modes. Well, perhaps not lots, but there's more than one. Number 8. We can write a large amount of text data to a file without punctuation, or in new line, etc. And we'll be able to easily make sense of that data when looking at the file with Notepad. True or false? False. False. All the data will be there, but you won't know where the line breaks are. And human beings are pattern recognition operations. That's how our brains work. Number 9. Writing a struct to a binary file is similar to writing an integer or a double to a binary file. True. True. Number 10. Which function is used to move the position of where the next read operation will occur on the file? Seek set? Nope. Which function? Seek set is a parameter, is one of the values of a parameter you can pass to the function. So what's the function? To position the file pointer to the next location you're going to read from. While we're at it, what does seek set do?
It sets the file pointer.
To where? Reach out choices. Beginning, end, or somewhere in the middle. Which does seek set do? What place is it at the end? What place is it somewhere randomly in the middle? Who knows? Somebody must know. Seek underscore C1. It places it somewhere in the middle. So there are two others, one places it at the beginning and one places it at the end. Look it up before the final. What's the name of the function that places the file pointer somewhere? FC. Number 10. This is 8. Number 11. True or false? We can write binary data to a file in a random order and then read the file from the beginning in random order and get back the original data 100% of the time.
False.
False. Why?
It's random.
That's true. And what is the definition of random? Unpredictable. 12. True or false? Opening a file in read mode, quote unquote, can cause the original file contents to be erased.
False.
False. It might display an ugly message, file not found, but it will not erase anything. 13. True or false? Opening a file in write mode, quote W quote, can cause the original file contents to be erased.
True.
That is true for the write mode. 14. True, false. Opening a file in append mode can cause the original file contents to be erased.
False.
False. Because it has to find the original file, and then it opens it and starts it at the end of it. 15. True, false. You can use the C standard library to generate pseudo-random numbers.
Yes, that's right.
True. Number 16. True, false. The binary file would represent, or store, an integer value in the same way that an integer variable would be represented in memory.
True.
It is true. That's the nature of binary. We're writing it bit for bit. Number 17. True, false. You use the same format placeholders when reading from a text file as you do when reading from the keyboard. Nope, it's true. That's why you can use fscanf and pass standard in as the first parameter. True, false. You cannot write the field values of a structure variable to a file. False. You can write, there's just values. You can do anything with a value from a structure that you can do with any other kind of variable. 19. True, false. fscanf always requires the memory address of the variable you wish to update. True. I.e., you have to give it the pointer. 20. Which of the following represents the file pointer, file star, where we write to by default? Standard L, which happens to be C. 21. Which preprocessor directive is used to make a macro? C. Hashtag define. In the computing world, this is called pound. I understand in the social media world it's hashtag. 22. If I have colors, brackets, blue, comma, green equal 2, comma, red. With that enum, what is the value of blue?
0.
0. Which happened to be answer A. Why? It starts at 0. Not all answers are complex, it's that simple. Next, 23. Using the same enum in the previous question, what is the value of red?
3.
Which was D. Why?
Because green sets the enum for that place to 2, and then red comes after green, which is just up by 1, which
Right.
is 3.
It just starts with the previous number, adds 1. 24. Oh, debug the following code. Okay, now we're with all this. Okay. Let's switch to a red pen. Maybe it'll be one of those. This is all question 24. Starts here, continues here. Okay, first error. First thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, you gotta add a asterisk before my file.
Correct. Next. There's another one.
The variable number isn't initialized.
Sorry, one more time?
There's number in the code that hasn't been initialized.
Not only has it not been initialized,
Yes, does not even declared.
hasn't even been declared. That's correct. So, you can declare it anywhere. I'm just going to put it here where it's convenient, where I have convenient space. Now, to her point, she said it hasn't been initialized. Do I need to initialize it? What is the first use? You can't see. Oh, you can see the program. What is the first use of number? Does it matter if it's initialized in its first use? Where's the first use of number? Here, this is the first use of number, right? Does it need to be initialized before you use it in this context? We'll go to the next person. Does number need to be initialized before its use here?
Oh, are you telling me?
Yeah.
I don't think so, no.
And why not? You're correct. Why not?
I mean, we're looking at memory address in the file. I mean, not in the file, in the file.
What does scanf do?
It takes a input from the console and then puts it in that memory address.
Well, it takes it from a file, but the point is, it puts it into this memory address. So it doesn't matter what was there before. That's why it doesn't need to be initialized. But she's correct in that it was not declared. You didn't have it to use. So you had to be declared. Next thing that you can think of or see that's,
There's no brace, it's a parentheses or a bracket instead of a brace for the if.
here?
Yeah, it's a bracket instead of a brace.
Instead of a parentheses, it needs to be an open brace. That's correct. Next person. Well, okay. Next thing.
On the same line, it should be ARGC and then 2 equal signs.
This should be a double equal. Is that what you're saying? Yes. Okay. Next thing that's not right. That's an assignment, right? But if this is an if, you definitely want to do a double equal here. Okay, next thing you can see.
There's no double quote for file name when it's my file equals open on the top.
Over here?
So
Over
the-
here.
Yeah, to the right.
You mean this is not quoted?
Yes,
Why would it need to be quoted?
because when you call or when you open a file, you need to have a quote for the name, and then
What do you really need to pass for this parameter? You need to pass a character pointer, which is a string. Now, a quoted string happens to be a character pointer, but file name is a character array, and when you use a character array without a subscript, it is by definition a pointer. So that's all fine. What else can you see? Okay, let's move next. What can you see? You won't find it on your phone.
I found the four thing that, yeah, the right on that, but
Which line?
I
Which half of the board? This half of the board or that half of the board?
um
This half?
board, but I can't find the last one. Yeah, so I just
So nothing that hasn't already been found.
yeah.
Okay, back to the last row. What do you see that isn't correct, that hasn't already been found? F scan F, this guy? What's wrong with that?
The file thing.
scanf?
File name.
Is missing the file pointer.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what do we call it? My file. We'll do it like this. Right. Yes, sir.
Shouldn't it be file name?
Why would it be file name? What does the method take? What does fscanf take as its first parameter?
Oh, never mind. Okay.
A file pointer.
I have a question about the while line.
Okay?
Is, cause, I mean, that would be our fifth fix, so that would be pretty much the last debug, correct? If there's 5 points and 5 things to debug, if that's what I'm getting correctly? Is that how the
You
point
shouldn't
system
assume that because there's 5 points, that there's only 5 things.
works? Okay, I thought you said that at the beginning of this, then never mind, I'll just wait till.
There's more than 5.
Okay, cool.
When I grade, I will simply require you to find 5 correctly. So if you find 1 incorrectly, that means you have to find 6 correctly to get full credit. If you note 2 things incorrectly, you have to find 7 correctly. Right? So no, there's more than 5, you didn't have to find them all. So was there something else about the while?
Yeah, the file name should be the file pointer.
That's right. Okay, where were we on the back row? Back row.
I was gonna say one, I was gonna say that, file pointer is one.
That one? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but that's already covered.
I'm sorry, were you gonna say this one or a different one?
I'm thinking the while, the off.
Oh,
Yeah, that, I was gonna say that. Anyways,
Okay.
inside the while loop, you're gonna need to add something to number.
say the last part again?
If you intend to use number to find the, I would assume sum of all the.
So FEOF returns a Boolean and the exclamation mark is not. So that makes it,
No,
so the
I-
while loop is correct. I mean, if you get FEOF correct.
After the if statement, you're going to need to add something to number if you intend to use the variable number as the sum of the whatever you scan from the file.
Why do you need to add something to number?
Because that's how the printf at the end is supposed to work.
Hang on. Oh, so what you're saying is, you may need to have an else here. In other words, you're not gonna do the exit.
You don't need the else, because there, if it runs the thing inside the if statement, it won't run whatever comes after.
You're right, this won't run right. Because you're not adding,
You just need like 2 extra lines-ish after the if statement.
so in other words, we need to be adding number to something to keep it running total. For instance, right?
What?
So in other words, at the end, we're gonna take the average of something.
Yes.
But we're doing a while number, we're overriding number each time. So we're not keeping a running sum of the numbers.
Yes.
Correct. I didn't even have that down here. Very good.
And the average of the numbers is, first of all, they're integers, so you're not gonna get an average. Second of all, you can't have it divided by 10 because we don't know how many numbers are inside of the number file.
That's right. That is correct. You don't know if 10 is the right number. You don't have don't have a count.
You need to clear it.
And you would also need to declare the count. And you would need to initialize that. Exactly right.
You would probably need to initialize 2 variables.
Yeah, you would need something to, like,
You can count on some out of the host.
and then you would also need to say, and you are correct in that just because you end up with an integer sum, it doesn't mean it's evenly divisible by the numbers. So if you really wanted to get technical, which you should, you would want to make things floats. You would want to make the result of that a float.
Since we have a return statement and we're returning an actual integer, wouldn't we have to change void names and if names?
That's correct, that's another. So, one of two things. You have to change one of them. You cannot say return -1, you can just say return, or change void to an end. Either one solves that. And since we don't know what return means, it doesn't matter which way you solve it, so that's correct. What else? Who else sees something wrong?
Do you have to do pound include standard lib for exit?
Or which function?
For the exit function, don't you have to include standard lib.h?
I think you do. It's gonna have to be on a separate line, of course.
And I have a follow-up tied to what I just said. Would we ever lose points if we cost the program functionality? So for like her suggestion, if you changed main to int main, instead of returning return -1 to exit -1, wouldn't the program have less functionality than it started with? So like, would we have lost points for that?
I wouldn't care.
Okay.
Not, because there's nothing specified about what the meaning of any return is. It's just, the point is that this is inconsistent with this.
Okay.
This is perfectly fine, because this is not relevant to the type of main. That's not what exit means. Exit is hard stop, throw everything away. It's not, it doesn't affect what comes back. What else? As you can see, they got subtler as we go, but they're still real. Yes, sir?
If you do change it to int main because of return -1, don't you need another return like at the end of the whole like function in case it doesn't do if?
It will compile and run without it. But yes, technically, you should put a return down here. If you change this to an int. Yep. Yes, sir.
Well, for the output, someone already mentioned how number really is just whatever was recently just scanned, and it doesn't really work there. You need the sum plus equals number. And for the actual like printed output, you should probably have it as the average of your numbers is percent the sum over 20, I'm assuming, since we have 20 integers going into the system or being read in the file.
You don't know how many you're reading. It
We don't
reads
know.
until it
Then just count.
gets to the end of file. Sir, go ahead, let's do him. Go ahead.
Are we supposed to assume that there's an existing file, and if there is, then wouldn't you need a hashtag include for that file? Because,
You mean the file you're reading?
yeah,
No, you open it, you,
the file, or,
here, you got the name of the file you're opening right here. In other words, you ask the user, what's the name of the file I'm opening? And you allow him to enter 19 characters because this is 20 characters.
If file name is a character array or a string, then shouldn't it not have
doesn't matter. In other words, if you didn't have that ampersand, it would work just fine because it is not subscripted. If you do have the ampersand, it works exactly the same way. Yet another anomaly of C, but it works.
Yeah. Do we ever use the second, what do you call it, parameter? The car, pointer, arc, E?
Do you ever use this one?
Yeah.
No.
Oh.
You mean this program doesn't happen to use it? No.
Alright, and what do we use system for? Like, I don't know what to do.
System?
Yeah.
System is a standard live function that takes all sorts of string parameters to do system kind of things. That's all system does.
So,
But,
like,
you know,
could we
you
have
don't need
crossed
to-
it out?
Hmm?
Could we have crossed it out? Or would the program not run without it?
If you crossed it out, I wouldn't care, it'd be fine.
Alright.
But there's nothing wrong with it being there. So,
I think what he was trying to say was, are we assuming that there's a file with a
Yeah.
bunch of numbers already in it that we're using
Because
the
how do
scan
you know
f
the file is
underscore s
used
to
or not?
call or to open?
it doesn't matter. Because when you get to this line, if whatever the user entered doesn't exist, it'll stop and say, file doesn't exist, or later, file doesn't exist, doesn't matter. And if it is there, because this is the user entry, right? The user makes a mistake, what do we do about that? Okay, what other things do you see wrong here? There's only one or two more.
Why do you have 3 arguments in the scanf?
This is scanf underscore s,
It is
which is where you have to give the third argument that says the maximum buffer size.
DEC.
Shouldn't the 20 be 19?
That's correct. I was waiting for somebody to get that one. And why should it be 19? Now, you knew it had to be 19
Oh, because of the
Why?
backslash 0.
because of the null that it puts into the array. You can only say 19 characters, because it's going to implicitly add 1, and you only have 20 characters in the character array. Hang on. Did fscanf get a comma file added to it? Where's fscanf? Oh. No, that's right. Yeah, if we did that one. All right, that's all the ones I found, plus a few that you found.
Could we have instead changed scanf underscore s to just scanf and then gotten rid of the 19 or 20?
Yep, I would accept that. You mean just by getting rid of the underscore s and getting rid of the third parameter?
Yeah.
That'd be fine.
I just forgot to put the count for the binomial sum for the average.
Yep. Okay. You guys thought deeply into this. That is good. That is programming.
Are we allowed to take a photo of the board?
Yeah, that shall help. Some people took it before we scribbled all over it. So, that's good. You have the before image, now I have the after image. If you want to walk up here and take pictures, feel free. Just don't ask me to be in the picture. You don't want to break your phone.
What was question 15 again?
15. You can use the C standard library to generate pseudo-random numbers.
Oh, okay, what was 14? Sorry.
14 was opening a file in append mode can cause the original file content to be erased. Which is
It was
false.
right?
How is the grading for
number 24 work? Like, if I missed one of the things, am I getting a point off, or
I need 5 correct things,
just as long as there's 5 things?
but if you said something was needed changing that didn't,
That's -1.
then it's -1, which means you need to get 6 correct things.
Okay. Gotcha.
Does fixing the average count as one mistake or two?
One more time?
Does fixing the average count as one mistake or two mistakes that you fixed?
Does which one count as one?
Like fixing the average, because you had to add 2 things to it?
This guy?
Yeah.
I'll be generous. In other words, there's lots of things to correct here, I only need 5. It'll be whatever it is, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it until next week. So, if you want to look at your graded exams prior to the final exam, I usually get here by about 5:30 every Wednesday. Sometimes earlier. I promise not to be late next Wednesday. I'll be here by 5:30. So if you want your exam, I'll be here at 5:30 for you to come get it. And then, of course, next week, we'll do the same specific questions for the final exam. But have them clear, because we're not going to take more than 30 minutes to do it, right? So know what they are before you get here, and be ready with the specific questions. And then we're going to do the final exam. Sir.
How long is the final exam?
Slightly over an hour and a half.
Oh,
Like double this one. But again, I mean, just like you guys saw with this one, I perhaps exaggerate the time it takes me to take the exam. I don't exaggerate, I just pause, perhaps I'm pausing too long. But almost everybody was done well before 40 minutes was out. So the final will be similar, right? It boils down to you either know it or you're not. If you do multiple choice, you better know the answer without having to guess which one it is. So that it's just a matter of finding the answer you already know in the list, or finding that the answer you already know is not there. Same thing for true false. You should be able to just rip right through those. It's the programming, the error detection, all that stuff. It's, oddly enough, for a programming class, the final exam involves programming. Sir?
Is there gonna be anything after exam 5? I mean, the finals next week?
My best wishes for you. That's all. How long will it take for me to post the final exam? I have until January 6th. I have no intention of taking that long, right? Because I certainly don't want to have this hanging around before Christmas. Right? So I hope to have everything, including the final exam, graded. So the first thing I'll grade after tonight will be this exam. And then I'll put that in. It probably won't be graded until the weekend, right, completed. Similarly, after you take the final, I'll put in your final exam score, but I still have labs and programs to grade. I finished all of program 4 earlier, except for those that are late. And then I went back and caught up to some. So basically the big thing I have to grade left is program 5 and a couple of labs. And of course, this exam and then the final exam. So I intend to have it all done before Christmas, technically speaking, and I'll send that out an announcement that I post to the grades. Okay, what's the difference between plus plus x and x plus plus? First one. Just in this context, is there any difference?
Yeah.
What does it do?
It increments it by 1.
Increments x by 1. In the context of what will y equal to? 1. What does this significance of the plus plus being after the x instead of before the x?
It always set it y to 3 because the plus plus happens after.
That's correct. At this point, what does z become equal to? 4. Plus plus happens afterwards. You can now say int a is equal to plus plus x. What does a equal? Just continuing on. At this point, x is equal to 4. Now you execute this statement. What does a equal to? Why?
Because 3 from before, right? 3 to the x plus plus, and that after the y.
Because the plus plus happens before the evaluation. Okay? Know how that works? Not you, I mean everybody. Know how that works? Times equal. What does it do? What is that the same thing as saying?
Sorry.
X times equal 5. It's the same thing as saying let me remind you again. Less than 1 week from tonight, 1 week minus 3 or 4 hours, you have a final exam. This is so trivial, everybody should know it. What is this the same thing as saying?
X equals x on 5.
Know what that operator all of its flavor to. There's plus equal, minus equal, divide equal, so forth. Okay? What does the percent operator do?
It gets the remainder.
It is the modulus operator which gets the remainder. That just occurred to me. I haven't come to where it was. What does x end up being equal to?
1.
Why?
It truncates.
It truncates, that's correct. Know all that stuff. And I'm not going to go over stuff that we've already gone over in the other review, right? Comment. How do you enter a comment? What are the 2 ways to enter a comment?
2 backslashes.
I was giving you one of them.
Yeah, and then a backslash with 2 asterisks.
Not a backslash, it's a forward
Or
slash.
forward slash, sorry.
And how many asterisks?
2.
No.
So everything we got was,
And then how do you end it?
asterisk and then, asterisk forward slash.
Right. Loops. Side row. What are the 4 kinds of loops we talked about?
Do while loop and
Correct. Know how all of those work?
You said 4 loops, right? There's only 2, 3.
What about 4 loops? Sorry?
I thought you said 4 loops. 4 different types of loops.
Sorry. 4 loops.
Oh,
Loops of the type 4.
I see.
Loops of the type do while. Loops of the type while. Sorry. 4 FOR, not FOUR.
Okay.
Is there another loop type?
Not that I know.
No. how does the switch statement work? What goes in here? What goes in here is something that evaluates to an integer expression. So obviously integers, right? An integer variable, well, it is obviously an integer expression. What else would evaluate to an integer expression? We talked about it in reviewing exam 5. When we said, what's this thing going to end up being equal to? Enum. You put an enum in here, right? What are some of what's the next thing you put inside a switch? Yeah, switch statement. Let's say we open the brace. What's going to be the next thing we put?
Who? Oh, you also could put a char value instead of an int.
You can also put a character value,
And
which is also an integer.
the next thing you put is case, followed by either a number or a type matching the one in the switch state, original switch expression.
Something that the compiler can evaluate to
Oh,
a static
no.
integer.
Okay.
Like a number 3, a character, quote, C quote, an enumerated value, like blue. Yes. So suppose you, okay, next. At the end of the case, what should you always put?
Great.
Yes, sir.
I don't understand how you could put an enum inside of a switch. Like, what effect would that have?
So remember when we said enum colors, and then we had blue,
Yeah.
and we decided that had the value of 0, because even if you don't explicitly state it, it starts at 0, and then we said green, we specifically assigned it a value, and then we had red, which ended up having a value of 3 because it was one more than its immediate predecessor. These things all represent integers, right? Integer expression.
Oh, so you mean like one of the fields of the enum colors? Is that what you would call them?
No, so suppose you say, you declare a variable called enum color.
Okay.
You give the variable a name, my shirt. I would flunk. I'm guessing this is green, but what is this? What color is this?
Blue.
See? My wife and daughters have a lot of fun with me. They do it on purpose. What color is this, Dad? Oh, shut up. Shut up, kid. Disinherited, that's what I tell them. No longer the favorite child. Anyway. But they do, they have fun. That's fine. As long as they're having fun, that's what matters. But the point is, this is an integer expression, right? So if this is blue, I'll take your word for it. Because the one thing I know is not to believe what I think. This is blue, right? Now suppose I assign that to blue, it would have a value of 0. So if I stuck my shirt in the switch, then in the cases I could even put blue or I could put 0, either one. And it would work just fine, it doesn't care. C is what is called a loosely typed language.
I was just wondering about the loops real quick. Would a recursion be considered a loop or?
I'm glad you brought that up. So, no. Recursion is used in place of a loop, and it can accomplish the same thing, but know about recursion and how it works. Okay, I'm glad you brought that up, thank you, I would've got to it, but now's as good a time as any. It's not exactly a loop, it can be used in place of a loop. But these are the loops. Recursion is recursion. A method calling itself. Did I answer your question about?
Like, so how does, so if you declare like an enum variable, is it like a structure where you like use a dot and then call the blue? You know, like my shirt dot blue, or?
Not in this language.
So, why would you declare an enum variable instead of just calling blue? Like, how do you like refer
Because
to?
I don't wear the same shirt every day.
So how do you refer to blue or like green or red using the enum variable?
Like this. Just use the enumerated value you define. It's sloppy and error prone, but that's how C is defined. In other languages, you have to be more explicit about it. For here, you could say my shirt equal blue. Because the compiler knows what blue means because you told it.
Hi.
Now, if my shirt equals blue and enum colors my shirt is in the scope before the switch, can you put, instead of case blue, can you put case my shirt?
No. This has to be something that can be evaluated by the compiler at compile time. It has to be a static fixed value. So my shirt is a variable. Right? So that doesn't work. The thing after the case has to be a fixed value. Besides case, what else can go in here? Where were we? Who was the next person to answer a question? We'll go with him. We'll go with him. Yeah. Go with him. What else did you put in here besides case?
You went.
Oh. You.
Did you go in or
It's okay, you do too. It's fine. Besides case, you have as many cases as you need. What else can you have here? Should you have here?
Default.
Default. And what does default do?
If there's no case, I mean,
If it's not one of the cases, it does default. What happens if you don't put a break here? Suppose you didn't have that break there. Next person.
Oh. Then it would execute blue and then the next one.
It just keeps going, that's
Yeah.
right. It is, in fact, this is such a problem that in C# you have to put the break there, or you'll get a compiler. Make C# said, make sure you know what you're doing. Okay. Next person. What's the character set used by C? ASCII. That's a simple answer, but it's a character set that C uses for everything. Diff variables and postfix. What is the signature of a function?
The signature of the function.
Yep.
So you have its return type, or just its type.
come back to them, let's just list these out first. First thing you have is the return type. Next thing,
The name of the function.
what are valid names?
Um,
What are invalid names?
Things like true, false, or EOF is an invalid name.
No reserved words. What can it not start with?
A number?
That's correct. Except for that, can it start with an underscore?
No.
Look to your left.
Yes, it can start with an underscore.
Yes, it can. Okay, so you have a name. Then what?
And then you have its parameters.
So you have parentheses. Can this be empty?
Yeah.
Yes, it can. But you have to have the parentheses. And then you have the parameter list. What does every parameter start with?
It's type.
Type. And yes, you can do this. You shouldn't. But you can do that. What you should actually do so, if you were just going to create a prototype, what would you do now?
Colon.
Semicolon.
Semicolon.
It's a semicolon because it's a colon except it's got a comma after the last dot. Called a semicolon. That's a prototype.
I'm sorry, I got kind of confused. Is the return type like would it be integer, char?
We'll come back to the return type in just a second.
Okay.
So this is a prototype. What's a prototype also known as?
Signature.
The whole thing is a signature.
Prototype.
Anybody? A what? People talk quietly when they're not sure they're right. It's okay. If you want to make a mistake, make a mistake. That's how you learn. Editor? Header. Prototypes are contained in headers, in header files, typically. I can't remember the other name for a prototype either, but maybe she does.
Is it a method?
No, the method is the whole thing. This is the prototype format. It's the declaration rather than the definition.
What's the difference between a method and a function?
Nothing. Two names for the same thing. Sometimes they're called procedures. Method, function, procedure, all are the same thing in programming parlance. Okay, when you get to some higher level languages, they think function means something specific. It's because they chose poorly in their terminology, but it's not relevant for this class. Okay. Back to our question about return type. What are valid, who's next? You can be next. What are valid return types?
There's void, integer, character.
Void, int, char, so on, right? Okay. What's the interesting one of that list? What does void mean?
It does not return anything.
That's correct. It means it doesn't return anything. Did that answer your question in the back?
Well, it does, but now I have another question.
What's your question?
I'm sorry, so then what is the difference, between that and just a type? Is that just like the variable name, like if you were to call it X?
You mean these types?
Yeah.
These are the same thing, except that this cannot be void. It can be void pointer, interestingly enough, but it cannot be void.
Oh, okay, thank you.
A void pointer, void star, is simply saying a pointer of indeterminate type. That is what void pointer means. Which you don't really need to know for this. But go ahead.
So I think during your test walkthrough, you said specifically that you can't have returning a value when the main was void. I had a return type of void, but at the same time, I think you specified a situation in another class where you said it is possible to return something, it just won't be expected wherever you're calling the method from. So like, are there situations where you can have a return type of void but return something anyway? Like an int?
If I said that, I said something wrong, which
Oh.
I do from time to time. If this is void, you can only put return semicolon. You should, if you say return parentheses something, semicolon, you should get a compiler error.
And I have one more question about void, if that's okay. When are you required to put void in the parameter list if there are no parameters? Because when I do it in a C file, it's fine, but when I did it in a header file, it said it was required. And I wasn't sure if that was like my system or. So if there are no parameters for a method, when do you have to put void there?
I don't believe you ever have to put void there.
Oh, you're not supposed to ever need it?
Hmm?
You're not supposed to ever need it, you're saying?
You're not supposed to, it's not supposed to ever be required.
Okay.
You can put it there to explicitly tell somebody there's no parameters. I don't know why I would never do that. I would expect them to do open paren, close paren with nothing in between means no parameters. It's not, it's not rocket surgery. That's a joke programmers use, because it's not rocket science, it's not brain surgery. Some people don't think it's not rocket surgery. Programmer joke. If you're going to be programmers, you better get used to bad jokes, because that's most of what we have.
So if you can have in the parameter list a void pointer, so it's just saying that it's going to have a type but you don't know what it is, then how would you go about accepting that type? If you want to save it into a variable but you don't know.
You end up doing something called a cast, which we also have not gone over in this class, which says, because I magically, via some other mechanism, know what type it is. That's actually how it works. In fact, when you use scanf, and you can pass an indeterminate number of parameters that are pointers, they're all passed as void pointers. And the format specifier is the thing that magically tells it what kind of pointer it needs to be, for instance. But again, you didn't go over that, so you don't need to know that. That's just how some things work under the hood. Did I answer your question back there? Okay. Where do we get to? Type def. What does type def do? Issue.
It's used to declare a struct, or
It can be used in declaring a struct, but, okay, so if I declare struct ABC and give it whatever I give it, if I declare a variable of type struct ABC, what words do I have to use?
you'd have to use struct ABC.
I have to use struct ABC. But if I said type def struct ABC and give XYZ, I could then just use XYZ as the type without putting the word struct in front of it. Same thing is true of enums. If I said type def is for type definition, right? Enum, colors, whatever, and I gave it spectrum, right? I could then declare something just by saying spectrum rather than saying enum colors. I could just use the word spectrum. That's what type def does in general. Okay? You can also use it for other things. You can say type def int ptr is equal to int star. And from then on, you can use int star or you can use int ptr. And believe it, there's a lot of that happens in the standard libraries. Okay, so that's type def. Understand type def. Understand structures. Understand what fields you can put within structures. Are there any limits to the fields you can put within structures? Well, we already got all the way down there. Are there any limits to the fields you can put in structures?
I don't think so.
There are not. You can, in fact, put structures, other structures, as fields of a structure. You can even put the structure itself as a field of the structure. In other words, when you eventually get to classes and whatnot, it's a self-referential field. That's what it's called. Don't worry about the details of that. Just know how structures work. Know how type def works as regards structures and enums and everything else. Next person, how does a static variable work?
It holds its value, like for each iteration.
Holds its value when?
Like if it's ever, like part of a loop or recursion, it doesn't reset after every, like loop. If that makes sense.
Not in the loop.
Loop
It
and
doesn't reset after, what is the static variable used inside of?
recursion then?
Inside of a method.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So it holds its value between calls to the method. That's
Okay.
how a static variable works. Where do you think a static variable is stored? Is it on the stack or the heap?
Heap, right?
It's in a special place of the heap,
Oh.
actually. It's actually in a special place, not associated, well, it's in a special place. It's not in the stack is the point. Because the stack goes up, goes down, goes up, goes down. So if it was in the stack, that's how variables lose their value. When you exit the method, the stack is cut back. So those variables are no longer there, right? So it couldn't be in the stack. So now how static variables of methods work. Next person, sizeof. What is it? Next one. Question.
I'm sorry. You just said that the static variable holds value between calls for variables.
Between calls to the method is declared in.
Then how did it, if they hold that value, how do they lose it between calls?
They don't. That's the point of a static variable inside of a method. It keeps its value in between calls to the method.
And if we don't use static variable, then it does lose its value.
If you just use like a regular variable,
Yeah.
suppose you say int x, right? Without saying static int x. When you exit the method, x is gone. But if you say static int x, when you call the method again, x will have the same value it had when you last exited the method.
Where, like in what scope should a static variable be defined?
It's generally defined in a method.
In the method?
Right? It has to be defined in a method for it to have any meaning, right? But can you declare the scope of it lower down? Yes, you can. But if it's lower down, right, you can't see it from outside that scope. Even though its value is kept, the scope of can you see the variable still applies.
Can you declare it like as a global variable?
You can, but there's no point because the global variable keeps its value till the end of the program. So, in fact, I don't even know if the syntax would work because there'd be no point in it.
So then, because you could just include regular numbers within a method, what would be the point to creating like a specific variable for it?
Because suppose you want to keep the value between calls to the method, but you want to say only the method can see this variable.
Oh, okay, I see.
That's where the scope comes in. Next person. No, I forgot the question, but I'll remember. Hold on. Sizeof. What does sizeof do?
It returns the amount of memory reserved for that specific type.
what's that gonna be equal to on a 32-bit machine? Size of int.
4 bytes.
It's gonna be equal to 4. That's correct. So this is for a type. Size of does something else. What's size of going to return for that? On a 32-bit machine.
12.
12. Know what size of does? Not just you, all of you. Pointers. Know all about how pointers work. Know about dereferencing a pointer. Know about how to create a reference to something that is passed as a pointer. Understand that when you pass a structure pointer, that just because it's a structure pointer, accessing the field within it may still need a reference in front of it. This was on one of your exams, exam 4. Right? We went over it in detail there. Go back and look at it so that you understand why you sometimes have. Okay, let's take an example. Okay. And you want to do this. Let's just do type down, struct, X. And Y inside the structure. Now I want to do a scanf. And I want to get the value into the field Y of the pointer myX. Okay? So, first question is, next person, how do I reference Y from a structure pointer?
You have to do ampersand Y.
No, just forget the rest. If I just want to reference Y from a structure pointer, what do I do?
Oh, just put the pointer without the ampersand.
My X, what goes next?
Oh, my x dot y.
This is a pointer.
My x arrow y.
My X arrow Y. Okay? Now I'm doing a scanf, so I have to have a pointer to all of that. So now I have to put the ampersand there. Understand that deeply and why and all that stuff. Okay? This is what I mean about pointers is everything in C. You have to understand all of that. You have to be able to think everything through and think it through carefully. That's it. Questions?
Could you go over the command lines?
Can I go over what?
The command line stuff that you talked about.
Sorry. What?
You talked about a few command line, I don't know, you talked about the command line last week.
You mean the arguments to main?
Yeah.
So like in program 4, you had int argc, which is count of arguments, and then you had character pointer to an array. Okay. So study all that, know all that. No, I'm not going to go back over all of that. You can study it, but you should know that. Yeah.
Okay.